Welcome to the Simply Soccer podcast. We're back at it this week, going over a topic that's actually very relevant to me currently at this very time, and I'm sure is relevant to many of you as well. And we're going to talk about motivation a little bit today, and probably some other topics that I randomly throw in there as I go on to tangents, which, naturally happens in these podcasts, as you know. Just a reminder for you in the beginning, any of you guys who are interested in self-development topics on how to grow as a person, how to grow into the kind of person you want to become, go check out my other channel, Untapped Potential. I just released a new video on there. Please go over to that video, take a look at it, like it, share it if you enjoy it, and let's help that channel to grow, because the more people we can get on that channel, the more help we can do for them. And again, it allows me to talk about topics that I wouldn't necessarily talk about on Simply Soccer. So it's good to kind of have that secondary channel where I can talk about different kinds of things. So once you're done listening to this, I will put the link to that in the comments and the description so you can go check out that latest video. Okay, so motivation. It's another one of those words that, hold on, let me adjust this. It's another one of those words that I think elicits different feelings and emotions and possibly even definitions for different people. We all have different motivations. I think we all define motivation a little bit differently. It's kind of like one of those very broad terms which can mean so many different things, and you kind of have to define what motivation means for you. But I want to talk about it in the broad sense, in what it means, and kind of go over what to do when you lose your motivation, how to keep your motivation going, because I know that's one of the biggest problems. And I think it's this shallow idea of motivation that causes us to ask the question, how to keep my motivation going? Because that's the kind of motivation you get from like a video you watch once, or like one of those motivational videos with like a lot of epic movie scenes and quotes and things. That kind of shallow motivation. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about more of a deeper motivation, which you can actually use to every single day, almost as like a default state, feel motivated. Now, I want to be completely transparent with you. The reason I'm bringing up this topic is because recently, over the last couple of weeks, I've been losing my motivation, and I've been noticing it. And there's a really good reason to why that happened. And I'm going to be going over that as well. I want to be completely transparent. I don't want you to think at any time that these things I talk about don't affect me, or that I have everything under control, or that I'm a completely fulfilled person or anything like that, because it's not even close to being the case. A lot of these podcasts, when I talk about certain things, a lot of the time I'm going over things that I've really struggled with in the past, or sometimes I'm even currently struggling with. Now, again, because I have developed certain habits like self-analysis, developing certain habits and things of that nature, it's helped me to get over and combat a lot of these things. But you have to understand, you have to continually do that, because if you do what I did, or I've done recently, which has caused me to lose some of my motivation, you can fall right back into bad habits and bad behaviors until you kind of, again, recognize it and get out of it. So understand, especially when it comes to motivation, habit creation, all these things, it's things you're going to be continuously doing that are going to help you in these areas. It's not a one and done type thing. I mean, life in general, improving as a footballer, whatever it is never a one and done thing. I mean, if that was the case, you would just practice once and be amazing, right? If that was the case, you would engage in a behavior that you wanted to create a habit around, and you would just, after a couple times, have the habit. It's not how it works. You have to do things, like we always say, consistently, repetitively. You got to up the challenge. You got to do all these things in order to develop all of the things we go over in these podcasts. So, motivation. So let's go over first why I lost my motivation for certain things, and how I'm dealing with that, and how I'm combating that, and making sure I get it back. And then we'll go over why you lose motivation, how to develop stronger motivation, things of this nature. And then we might branch out into some other topics, as we do on this podcast. But I'm going to try and stick with that for as long as possible. If we get some time at the end, maybe I'll touch upon some other topics. But let's get right into it. So the first one is, how did I lose my motivation? So it's happened over the last couple of weeks. Before the last couple of weeks, I would say prior to these last 2 weeks, my motivation was very high and a lot of good things were happening. I was releasing videos every single day. I had a process of doing that, which was very productive. I was following my habits every single day. You know, I had a lot of habits I was following, a lot of behaviors, and I wasn't missing a day. I was feeling good every single day. I was working out every single day, eating right. You know, everything was essentially coming together. And I think the thing I fell into, and this is something you have to be careful of, is becoming too comfortable. We seem to, and this has happened to me a few times actually. This is not something that's new to me. So I knew how to deal with it when I was like, oh crap, I've fallen back into this, haven't I? But this is something you have to be careful of. When you start tasting a little bit of success, or you're tasting not even success in a grand scheme of things, but you're starting to build up those daily wins and you're starting to build up momentum, that's when you have to be extra, extra careful. That's when you have to be extra, extra vigilant. Because you may get to a point where you become so comfortable that you subconsciously think, I no longer need to put in the same amount of work because it seems like this is just happening by itself now. And you'll get this feeling, you'll feel like you're riding a wave, but the problem is if you don't keep up with things, you'll fall right back off that wave. So that's what happened to me probably like a week or two ago, and I've been slowly kind of getting right back up to where I was before since then. And in fact, another great thing about this, when you kind of go through that, I would consider this a failure, you know, a week or two ago where I lost my motivation and stopped doing certain habits and kind of just went back into in a very autopilot type mode. I would consider that like almost like a failure, but in a good way, because actually since then I've been doing certain things and I've been reminded of certain ideas, trying to build myself back up that I had forgotten about, so that when I have everything back, in my routine, in my process, which I will by a couple days by now, by next week, I'm going to probably be operating at even higher levels. So that's one thing just to take away from that. When you fail or you fall out of routine, use it as an opportunity to get yourself back up, but also to get back up to an even bigger place. But that's just kind of go on a tangent there, but that's just something as well to recognize. You can see every failure as a failure, or you can see it as an opportunity to learn. And that's how I'm trying to process this one. So anyway, I got too comfortable. I started seeing a little bit of success. I started seeing the momentum building up. I started seeing myself getting more and more fit. I started seeing and experiencing, I should say as well, myself, the videos doing a lot better. I started experiencing more subs, more views. You know, I started experiencing my habits becoming almost second nature. Not quite yet, but almost. And, you know, something from a person I follow all the time named Robin Sharma, he talks about this, like nothing fails like success. And he also talks about something called the self-saboteur, where you sabotage yourself. And he says your self-saboteur, the thing that sabotages you, kind of the voice inside your head, screams loudest the closer you get to your goal. Because the closer you get to your goal, the more things will change. I mean, if you have a big goal or even just something you're trying to develop, if you have certain habits you're developing every single day, if you are motivated every single day and moving towards a certain goal quickly, or even just in a progressive way that's slow, the closer you get to that goal, the more you are yourself changing as a person. And the self-saboteur, you can call it that, your ego, you can call it your old self, your old story, whatever it is, does not want you to change. And so the closer you get to your goal, the louder it screams. Now, I don't mean a literal scream, but the louder it tries to sabotage you, the more noise it makes, the more times it tries to trip you up. And this is what happened to me. I just experienced this. I was getting closer and closer to certain goals. New opportunities were opening up for me. You know, new things were coming about. And it was around this time, and I kind of just sabotaged myself. And again, you do this subconsciously, which is why you have to consciously be aware of this. This is why you have to consciously make sure you are maintaining your motivation. And you can maintain your motivation using certain strategies, which I will talk about in a bit. But this is kind of, I'm going over what happened to me. So I had this self-saboteur, this method, which I saw myself doing well. I saw that the habits were working. I saw all this stuff was coming together, and things were coming together, and things were feeling great, and I was getting better. And I just started to slowly fall off the wave because things were becoming a little easier. Now, when things start to become easier, you're riding the momentum, you know, you're developing the habits. This is when you need to double down. It's not when you need to slow down. It's when you double down, because this is when your old self, your story, your resistance to change is going to kick in on overdrive. And if you're not doubling down at that point, it will probably win. And I've experienced this many times. And it was something, again, I forgot about. I forgot to keep analyzing this, and it snuck up on me. Subconsciously, again, remember, if it's subconscious, it's kind of like working in the background. You're not conscious of it. But what you can do consciously is maintain that motivation, so when the little voice that tells you not to do the workout is ignored and you do the workout. So when that little voice, maybe it's even louder now because you're getting closer to your goal, is telling you you don't need to follow through on that opportunity because of whatever, you follow through instead. It's just kind of being aware of this. So that's essentially what happened to me. I became too comfortable. I figured, I guess in a subconscious way, all this stuff is happening. I don't need to, it's okay if I miss this one day because I've already been doing it consistently. It's okay if this happens. And after you miss one day and then you miss 2 days, I've gone over this before, you miss a week. And that's where my motivation really was starting to be sapped. You know, when you go through a period of growth and then you fall out of that growth, it really does strike your motivation down a little bit. So I had to kind of recenter myself. So that's kind of why my motivation had been lacking. You know, I started engaging in bad habits I had before. I haven't been, for example, the last week, except for like the last couple of days where I've been kind of had this resurgence where I'm getting myself back up to speed, where I'm redeveloping everything or just getting myself back on the wave. I haven't been eating that healthy. You know, I've been missing some workouts. I've been feeling pains in my body. Another thing that hasn't helped is I've been injured. I have a problem with my knee, which has not helped. But still, that should not be something that I use as an excuse to not do my other things that I can do. It's prevented me from training as much as I've wanted, but it does not prevent me from creating videos. It does not prevent me from going through on opportunities. It should not sap my motivation, at least not for long. And I know it can. Like, it's not a major injury, just the kind of small injuries back to back that are happening, but it's not an excuse. So that's what happens. You kind of go in this downward spiral. And when you go through this, when you lose your motivation, especially if you've had it for a while, the biggest thing is to really get back at it right away. Like if I had waited any longer, you know, it could have been like a month or 2 months before I actually got back on the horse and went forward with things. There's actually a great video by Terry Crews, if you know who he is. He's an actor, very famous actor. He does a video on self-discipline, and he kind of goes over this because self-discipline and motivation, I think, tie in together. You know, I think without self-discipline, you can't develop motivation, and I'm about to talk about this as we go over what I think deeper motivation is compared to shallow motivation. I'm going to explain what the two are, what I believe them to be. Remember, these are all my opinions, by the way, guys, and things that I've experienced. You know, definitely do your own research on things like motivation, things of this nature. But I'm going to link down below a 2-part video series Terry Crews did. Each video is like 5-6 minutes each, so it'll be like 10 minutes of viewing, and it's a really good way of developing self-discipline. And after listening to this and kind of watching that, which I recommend you do, you'll kind of see how both of these tie in together. You know, you really need both. You know, a lot of these good habits we're going to talk about, you know, motivation, self-discipline, organization, all these things, they usually all play off each other and tie in together. Okay, so that's how I lost my motivation. Now, how did I gain it back? Well, I had to take a big look at myself in the mirror, metaphorically, take a look at what was going wrong, and I had to identify what happened. Now, obviously, I have identified what happened because I'm telling you what happened now. So obviously, I came to the conclusion, this is what happened. I became too comfortable. I stopped prioritizing the things that were helping me get successful. I moved away from the simple base things that I needed to kind of for other things like I call it like your foundation or your bedrock of habits or things like that, where these are the things you need to be doing on a daily basis that kind of branch out and lead to other successes in your life, right? You'll be surprised the kind of ripple effect certain habits and behaviors have. I really do believe good actions lead to more good actions and bad actions lead to more bad actions. You know, for example, eating poorly leads to you eating poorly more often. Eating well leads to you eating well more often. And even like eating well may lead you to feeling better, which will lead you to better habits, you know, things of this nature. I really do believe that like attracts like. Positive attracts positive and negative attracts positive in your life, even at the most small level, even at a tiny level. You know, that one tiny piece of action could be the catalyst for great change in your life. I really do believe every single piece of action has meaning. Maybe some has more meaning than others, but that simple good action of whatever, maybe meditation or going for that run, could lead to many other good actions after that, and with that being the catalyst for it. So, you know, that's why I had to kind of look at. And I saw that the reason I kind of lost my motivation and I fell out of my habits a little bit, or most of them, there's some habits I have that by this point, it's going to be so hard for me to fall out of them because I've been doing them so long. So I still have been doing those on a daily basis. But the habits I was trying to form, I was falling out of those. Like the ones I was trying to form, the newly formed ones that I was trying to. I'm saying this so wrong. The behaviors I was trying to form into habits at that point, I fell out of. So I identified why that was happening. And I noticed there were certain behaviors I was taking for granted. Certain little things that I would consider a part of the foundation of everything that I do, like the foundation of my habits and my thoughts and everything. And I was taking them for granted, and I wasn't putting too much emphasis on them anymore. I wasn't prioritizing them. And I was, in the end, fell into bad habits because of it. Because if you don't deliberately choose your habits, your thoughts, and your behaviors, you will be drawn into certain things by default. And usually those things you'll be drawn into are things like video games, TV, Netflix, distractions, essentially. If you don't occupy your own attention deliberately with things like reading, improving yourself, working out, eating well, all these things, you will fall into the things that other people want you to fall into, the things that the advertisers want you to fall into, the things that the junk food corporations who make you addicted to their food want you to fall into, to the thoughts and ideas other people want you to fall into. And that's why it's incredibly important to do this yourself and determine what you want and to stay motivated in moving towards what you want. Because if you don't choose your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, your habits, someone will for you. You won't realize that they are, but they will. You only need to look at certain advertisers. You only need to look at the world around us. And you'll see that this is the case. Every time you turn on the TV and the news comes on, you have someone trying to convince you of their agenda or their narrative. It may not be true. It may not be something, it may be something that someone else believes is not true or is providing evidence to the contrary. However, if you're being fed that information and you're allowing that information to come into you, and you're not choosing what you're doing, you will start to believe that stuff. So a little off topic, it's kind of related though. So that's how I determined that I lost my motivation, is I lost those important little simple things, those habits, those behaviors that were allowing me to do the bigger stuff. You think of like a foundation. If you have a weak foundation, things start to fall through the cracks. So if you're trying to develop a certain habit, but you don't have this foundation that allows you to do that, of these other really good habits or behaviors, they fall through the cracks and you don't start doing them. You don't continue to do them, It's kind of like, certain healthy habits lead to more healthy habits. If you have a bedrock and a foundation of healthy habits and behaviors, it allows you to then go on and build more that are going to help you. Okay, so that's how I lost mine. Let's go over now the difference between what I consider shallow motivation and then deep motivation. And deep motivation will be the kind of motivation to actually get you out of bed each morning, moves you closer towards your goals. It's the kind of motivation that's harder to lose if you do certain things, while shallow motivation is fleeting. Shallow motivation is the kind of motivation you feel, but then 5 minutes later you've lost it. I'm sure we've all experienced that. Now, there's actually a place for shallow motivation, and I think you can use it, but it should not be your main motivation. It should not be the main driving force behind what you're doing. You can't rely on it. It's too unstable. So I'm going to go over the difference. So shallow motivation to me is the motivation you gain when someone says something to you that's inspiring, the motivation that you get when you watch a motivational video on YouTube, like you watch a motivate. And there's actually even studies done on this where they have people, I'm trying to remember the exact study, where they have people listen to motivational stuff, like videos and things, before doing something. I think it was like for working out, where they have someone do nothing and then they have someone do something else. And it was actually the people who listen to motivational content were less likely to follow through on their behavior that they had set out for these people. I think it was working out. Now, that's not to say, it was like off by like a few percentage. So it was actually not like significant, but by a few compared to another group. And what this really showed is that this kind of shallow motivation or one-time motivation is not enough to really have much effect on you. So it doesn't really make a difference, really. If anything, it had maybe a negative impact. And the only thing I can think of to why that is because when you're feeling that shallow motivation, you're thinking of all the things you're going to be doing. And that feeling of just feeling motivated for some people is enough of a feeling that they actually don't go out and do anything. It's kind of like if you think about an action you're going to take and you feel good about it, and or actually it's like this. If you've ever told someone a goal that you have or something you're going to do, but then don't do it because they're like, wow, dude, that's awesome. And you get this good feeling because your friend's like, oh man, this guy's doing this, he's awesome. And then you get such a good feeling from that, you don't actually go out and do it, right? Because you already got the good feeling. So that's shallow motivation. If you look up like a video, now even these podcasts could be considered shallow motivation to a certain degree. Now, it can be considered both. So if you take this podcast and then just use it solely for motivation and not a way to change, or you don't use it as something that you then go out and actually do something about your situation, then it's shallow motivation. If it's something that causes you then to go deeper, to look within yourself, to look at your own motivation, to look at your own habits and things, and you start working from there, then it's a bit deeper. But deeper motivation is always something, to me, that's within you, something that you've developed, something that's a driving force in your life. You know, you look at maybe professional players and you look at how they've become pros, and you can see that their motivation kind of allowed them to get to where they are. And I guarantee you their motivation didn't come from watching motivational videos every morning. There was more of a driving force. It was more embedded in them. And so deeper motivation to me is having a crystal clear objective, mission, goal in mind that is so clear that you see it like almost every waking hour. You are motivated by this picture in your mind of what you want. I mean, I know I like all the time talk to you guys about the importance of goal setting. And this is why. If you have a goal, a vision, a mission, something like that, that can drive you forward. Now, again, you can't just make any old one. Like, I've had goals that I've made that I have not had emotional attachments to, and I've not followed through on them. And then I've had goals, big goals that I've made that I have such an attachment to them. I've become so obsessed with them that they've come to fruition. So how do you create deep goals? Deeper goals, the goals that motivate you to get out of bed in the morning, to keep going when times get tough. And it actually is, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. And again, it's going to come down to repetition and habits. Something I'm learning from Robin Sharma, which is kind of me getting back to basics. I was taking a Robin Sharma course about a year ago, and I'm taking it again just to kind of remind myself of some of the ideas. And one of the ideas I was reminded of, and I think is very important, is this idea of goal setting, and then this idea of how repetitive thoughts or repetitive words in your head what lead to your beliefs. And beliefs are what drive us. Beliefs are what cause us to take action. Beliefs are what cause us to do what we do. I mean, you look at, if we're taking a non-soccer related example, you look at like a religion, or you look at something else that has deep-rooted beliefs in it. People act in a certain way based on those beliefs because they're deep-rooted beliefs. You know, they're a part of them. So you need to make your goal something that is embedded within you. You need to make it something that you can think of. Like, you know, if I was to be like, hey, what's your big goal in life? You know how many people would be able to tell me an answer? Very few. And again, they've done experiments on this. It's very few. I forget what the number is, and I may be pulling this right out of my ass, but I think it was like 98 people out of 100 would not know. And I think a speaker said that, so that may have been like his own little number exaggeration. But the point is, the majority of people do not know. They don't know because they've never sat down and set a goal. They've never like felt out what they truly want to do. They've never set the parameters for it. They've never set the expectations. They've never, they've done anything. They haven't planned anything. They're mindlessly moving around. Another really good analogy I like is Robin Sharma said this, and I was actually watching a lesson tonight. Actually, not tonight, when I'm recording this, that went over basically the last thing you want to happen is to get to the top of the mountain only to realize you climbed the wrong mountain. I'm going to say that again. So the last thing you want to happen is to get to the top of the mountain only to realize that you climbed the wrong mountain. So what's that mean? That means your clarity, your focus was not in the right place. Think of it. If you climb a mountain and then you see another mountain and that was the mountain you needed to climb, how much time have you wasted climbing the wrong mountain? And the reason this happens is because you're not clear on what it is you want. You're not clear on what your motivation is. You're not clear on your goals. Because if you climb any old mountain, you may be able to get to the top of it, but what if it's not the mountain you wanted to climb? What if it's the mountain that you thought maybe, but you didn't do enough analyzing, you didn't actually put in the work to figure out which mountain you need to climb in the first place. But when you do that work, when you have complete clarity, and another thing he says is clarity precedes mastery. Once you have the clarity, you know what your goals are, you know what you want, that's where the motivation comes from, because then you can absolutely say, I've put in the work to discover what it is I truly want, I've put the plans in place, I've reverse engineered it, I know which mountain I need to climb. And then you begin climbing the mountain. And because you know what you want, you know where you're going, the motivation follows. Now again, it's not as cut and dry as that. There are going to be times when you don't know what to do. There are going to be times when you're confused. There are going to be times when you need to re-clarify things. But that's the basics of it. Clarity. Without clarity, you will climb the wrong mountain. And if you're climbing the wrong mountain, you better believe you're going to lose motivation. And again, you may even get to the top of that mountain. It may be a small mountain. It might be a big mountain. Who knows what it is. But what would happen if, for example, you were climbing, you're going off towards a certain goal and you just kind of set the goal willy-nilly. You didn't really go too deep to figure out if this is the direction you need to go in. And then 3 months later, you've done all you could and then you only recognize that you wasted 3 months because it was the wrong mountain. 3 months where you could have spent moving towards the goal you truly want. I really do believe motivation comes from following your passion, from following what it is you truly want and not compromising with that. Now again, not everyone's situation will allow for that, but even in a situation, for example, like you're working a 9-to-5 job, I don't know how many of you are, but let's say that's your situation and it's not what you want to do, even in a situation like that, you can still do something towards your passion. You have to first figure out what it is, and again, you can experiment with this, figure out what it is you like. What do you like doing? What would you, one of the greatest things I ever heard from Alan Watts is he said, you know, if money wasn't, this is not verbatim what he said, don't quote me on this, but he said along the lines of, if money was no object, what would you do? And he said he would ask this to students when they were trying to figure out what they were to pursue academically and then go after. And they would always say, when he would ask them that question, if, you know, what would you do if money wasn't an object? They would say things, oh, I would love to be a painter, a writer. Someone said, I want to, you know, do horseback riding. All these things that these people were truly passionate about, things that they would wake up and do for free. If you know, because they loved it so much. And then Alan Watts simply said, do that. Do that. So what is that thing for you? What is that thing that, if money was no object, like you didn't have to worry about money, and don't worry, I'll get into that in a sec, but what would you do? Think about it. If you removed the restriction of money, the tether of money, what would you do? Now, you may be in a situation where you can't do that full time right now, and that's fine. I mean, I can't do, you know, YouTube. You know, as I've been doing this, I've had jobs I've had to do to pay for things. But I stuck with what I liked to do and I'm passionate about, and now SimplySoccer is at a point where I'm not able to sustain myself just yet, but I'm not far away. And that all started because I figured out what I love. I figured out what motivates me, what truly gets me out of bed in the morning, what am I excited to do? When I wake up in the morning, what am I excited to do? And I started doing that. And so far it's been great. It's kept me motivated. In the long run, of course, I told you I lost my motivation, but that came down to other factors. That came to me forgetting why I was doing what I was doing. That came down to me not having my priorities straight. That came to me for about a week or two, climbing the wrong mountain, hopping off the mountain I was currently on and climbing the wrong one, then realizing I was climbing that wrong one and hopping right back up on the one I knew I should be climbing. And the motivation followed. So, what is it for you that you would just, if you could do it all day, you would do it for free? If money was no object, you'd do it. You know, it's different for everyone. But it has to be your motivation. Now, for a lot of you, I feel like playing football is that for you. That's for a lot of people. Playing football, playing soccer. That's mine, you know. I found other passions as well from doing YouTube. I love creating the videos, for example. It's another thing I found I'm very passionate about. And the funny thing is, if I look back in my childhood, I actually remember making home movies, you know. I remember making just fun videos when I was like 7, 8, 9 with like a camcorder we had, like one of those old school ones. They weren't good or anything. I was a kid, but you know, I remember enjoying doing that. And now I've been able to mix two of my passions, football and video creation, and have created a YouTube around it, and I love doing it. You know, if I could wake up every single day of my life, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes because I think this is what happens. I start losing that. I start forgetting about that. I start getting distracted by other things, and then I have to come back to, wait a second. What is it I want to do? This is what I want to do, right? And I have to keep following through with that. And my motivation comes right back. It's like, yeah, there it is. I got distracted there for a second. I got on the wrong mountain. Got to get right back to the one I know motivates me, the one I know I love, all right? So this may sound a bit strange, but you really need to find that. Now you need to find what it is. If you are incredibly passionate about football and you have clarity about it and you work out goals and you organize yourself around it, you won't lose motivation. You may every now and then, like I am right now, like I did the last couple weeks, but again, it doesn't take me long to gain it back. I just put things back into perspective. I make sure my priorities are straight. I check what I'm doing and I find what went wrong. And I go, oh, the only reason I lost my motivation is because I was doing this or I was not doing this. So I really think that deeper motivation comes from that inner place of passion, that inner place of love for whatever it is you're doing. And I don't think it really can come from anywhere else, because at the end of the day, if you don't love what you're doing, and I know this sounds cliche, and if you, like 3-4 years ago, if you told me this, I would have said, it's so cliche, well, I won't believe that. But I've been living through this, and I've discovered this. And basically, when people like Robin Sharma and Tony Robbins and people operating at such a high level say these things, I tend to listen. And I recommend you do the same. So you got to find that thing that you love doing. You got to find a way to love what you're doing. It's not only about finding that thing. If you can love what you're doing now, that'll do it too. That'll motivate you. And again, to get that, you need clarity. Clarity precedes mastery. You need to know why you're climbing the mountain in the first place. Like if you can't tell me not only what your goal is, if then you tell me your goal and I ask you why, you can't tell me your why, it probably isn't the right one. Right? You know, you need to have a why. You don't need to always know the how. You know, the how will sometimes reveal itself to you once you figure out your why and you start moving. You know, like that's why they say, you know, the best time to start is now, because everyone likes to not start because they don't know what to do or how to start, but there is no right way to start. You know, when I started uploading videos to SimplySoccer, for example, I had no clue. Look at my first video. I kept it up. You guys can actually, this is embarrassing, but you can take a look at my first video. It is atrocious. It is so bad. I had no idea what I was doing. But the important thing that happened is I started. I recognized that this is something I feel strongly about, and it developed into something that I truly love to do. Mixing two things I'm very passionate about. And it's that love and that passion for these things that has driven me forward to the point where the channel's now at 70,000-ish subscribers, to the point where it's got millions of views, to the point where I have players contacting me, telling me how much the videos have helped them. None of that happens if I never start, and none of that happens if I'm not coming from a place of love and passion. If I didn't love doing this, you would feel that through the videos. It would be apparent. And I would be miserable. And I would lose my motivation. SimplySoccer wouldn't have happened. It would have died maybe at a couple thousand subs and never have been seen again. You have to have the passion. That is where the motivation comes from. That is what allows you to get out of bed and do it. So, for those of you, let me just check the time on this podcast because I have not looked. Okay, so we need to wrap this up. So I know a lot of you came probably into this podcast and you've come this far looking for motivation to continue practicing, looking for motivation to continue training. And for that, again, you have to fall in love with it. You have to put things into perspective. You have to be clear on why you're doing it. Why are you playing football? Why do you want to get better at football? What are your goals? Be very deliberate and clear about this, because if you're not, you're going to lose your motivation. When you need to call upon that motivation and remind yourself why you're doing it, if you don't have that clear, if that's not clarified, you might fall off. And this has happened to me. And then I've reminded myself of why, and I go, oh shit, that's why. Oh my God, how did I forget that? And then the surge of energy comes back and that passion returns. It was always there, but I just had to kind of uncover it again. So that's essentially how to develop deeper motivation. So I've gone over how I lost mine and how I got it back. I became too comfortable is why. So, sometimes you need to stay at the basics. The basics are, and again, this is another thing from Robin Sharma. He said, don't think of success as complex. Think of it as actually very simple, but doing the simple things over and over again. Again, don't quote me on that, but that's essentially a lot of what his teachings will say. It's not about the next complex, things need to be complex in order for them to be good. In fact, most of the good things that will happen are going to come from simple processes that you do repetitively, that you keep pushing to make better. So what I want you to do is, you do not have to put this in the comments, but you can if you want for everyone to see. I want you to put down, what is your motivation? What is your passion? What is driving you to do what you do? Now, a lot of you are going to put soccer, so that's good. Put soccer, football, whatever form you want to use. And I want you to tell me why. Why do you love it? Where is this motivation going to come from? Now, I also want you to do, you don't have to do this in the comments, I want you to be very clear on why. I want you to write this down. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just trying to give you some steps that are going to help you be more motivated. I want you to write down, just somewhere, why you're playing football. Do you just love it? Is it incredibly fun? I mean, that's enough, honestly. Is it just something you step on the pitch and you feel at home? Something I always liked is when I would step on a pitch, it felt right. Like I felt comfortable on the pitch when the game was about to start, but it's like a second home to me. Is that one of your reasons? And then you need to clarify for yourself what you're pursuing. Like, do you want to become a pro college player? And then you have to go over why you need to do that. I feel like a lot of players want to become pro because that seems to be like the pinnacle of playing the sport. But you don't need to want to become a pro to enjoy this sport or to even be incredibly passionate about it. Okay? So make sure you do all that for yourself. You clarify things. You ask yourself why you're moving in this direction. And, just really get really clear on that. In the comments, again, I want you to put down, what is it that motivates you to play soccer? Or you can put something else. This could be something else. Your passion could be something else. But for a lot of you, I know it's going to be soccer. So tell me why. Why do you love soccer? Because if you can tell me why, and you can tell me what your goals for soccer are and why those are your goals, you have your motivation. You just need to complete every single day. You need to remind yourself of that motivation. Every day you wake up, go, why am I playing soccer? Why am I training 6-7 days a week in order to become better? And there you go. You're like, oh, that's right. That's why I'm doing it. And then you go through your day and you look at it again at night and you go, oh yeah, that's right. And you keep reminding yourself until it's so a part of you that you don't even need to read it in the morning, but you probably still should. Again, this is one of the things, you don't want to fall out of these habits. But you need that why, you need that passion, you need to know why you love it, you need to feel it, and you need to be honest with yourself if you don't. It's okay if you don't, but you just need to be honest with yourself because you might be climbing the wrong mountain. All right, guys, so that's it. This has been a long one, and I know I've gone off on a lot of tangents. I really hope every time I make a podcast like this where I get like this kind of passionate myself about these ideas, I know I go off on tangents. So if you did make it all the way to the end, thank you. You're only really helping yourself by doing this, which is great, and the thing is, like I said, guys, make sure you take action. It's no good to listen to this. Again, if you just listen to this and it gets you kind of motivated, but then you don't take any steps afterwards, it's shallow motivation. Make this something that's going to be a deeper learning session, deeper motivation, where you actually get some clarity on your motivation, on your passion, on what you want to do, what you want, all that stuff. Okay? So in the comments, let me know why you love soccer. and put down hashtag passion, because I think we've used motivation. So put down hashtag passion. That lets me know that you've listened all the way to the end. And if you have a question or you comment with hashtag passion, I am much more likely to respond. If you ask me a question or you have some kind of comment, I'm much more likely to respond. And even if you don't have a question or a comment, or you don't want to write down what I suggested in the comments and you're going to do it on your sheet of paper or whatever, put hashtag passion down there, just because it indicates to me you've listened all the way. And I really do like to determine which ones of my viewers have listened, because it helps me identify the players who really are trying to make a change and trying to become better. All right, guys, so thank you for listening to all of that. I know that's a lot, but I hope you got something out of it. Any questions? I feel like there will be some questions on this because I did go kind of all over the place on that, but hopefully it made sense. Thanks once again. Put the hashtag down there, and I will speak to you in the next podcast, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.